quiet table, dimly lit by the soft glow of oil lamps, bread resting on wooden plates, and a single cup of wine waiting to be lifted. This is not just a meal. It is the moment when time itself seemed to pause, a night that carried both love and betrayal, hope and sorrow, sacrifice and redemption. For centuries, believers have returned to this table in their prayers, their churches, and their faith. This is the Last Supper, the final gathering before everything changes forever. Long before the night of the Last Supper, the people of Israel had a meal that defined their history. It was the Passover meal, a sacred tradition that remembered how God led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Families gathered together, eating bread made without yeast, bitter herbs, and roasted lamb, all carrying deep meaning. Each bite reminded them of the pain of the past and the freedom God gave them. For every Jewish family, this meal was not just food. It was a living memory, a way of bringing history into the present. Now imagine Jesus and his disciples preparing. For this very meal, the streets of Jerusalem were crowded with pilgrims who had come from every direction to celebrate Passover. The city was alive with voices, with families searching for places to stay, with the smell of roasting lamb carried through the air. The disciples would have been busy finding a safe and private room for their teacher. In those days, an upper room was the perfect place, away from the crowded streets below. A quiet place where sacred words could be spoken. As the evening began, Jesus sat down at the table with his closest followers. The bread was ready, the wine was ready, and the ritual prayers of the Passover were expected. But this night would not be like any other night. This was not just a memory of the past. This was the beginning of something new, something eternal. The Last Supper was not chosen at random. Jesus knew exactly what it meant to sit at that table during Passover. For generations, lambs had been sacrificed so that the people could remember how death passed over their ancestors. But on this night, the Lamb of God was seated among them, ready to give his own life for the world. Every element on that table carried a meaning that reached beyond tradition. The bread and the wine would soon no longer be symbols of the Exodus, but of his body and his blood. The disciples, however, did not yet understand this. To them, this was the same familiar ritual they had grown up with. They did not see the shadow of the cross already stretching over the room. They did not see how their teacher's calm voice carried both love and sorrow. They did not see how this night would mark the end of one story and the beginning of another. In that moment, history and destiny met at a table. The story of Israel's freedom joined with the story of the world's redemption. And sitting at the center of it all was Jesus, quietly preparing to give his final gift to his friends, and to every generation after them. The story of the Last Supper has been painted on walls, sung in hymns, and preached from pulpits for centuries. People know the image of Jesus sitting at a long table, with his disciples gathered around him, some leaning close, some whispering in fear, others staring in disbelief. But no matter how many times the story has been told, it continues to come, alive in new ways. And in our time, one of the most powerful retellings has come through The Chosen. The Chosen is not just a series. It is a journey that lets us walk beside fishermen, tax collectors, and ordinary men who were called to something greater. From the very first season, we watched as Jesus called his disciples one by one, breaking into their daily lives with words that carried eternal weight. We saw doubts, questions, and small acts of faith slowly turn into bold steps of trust. Each season pulled us closer, not to a distant figure in stained glass, but to a living teacher who laughed, wept, healed, and embraced. By the time the story reaches the Last Supper, we no longer see these men as names on a page. We know their fears. We know their rivalries. We know their hopes. We know that Peter speaks quickly, that John carries a soft devotion, that Matthew still struggles with his past, and that Judas hides a secret storm. This makes the supper not just a holy moment in history, but an intimate gathering of friends we have come to know. The Chosen gives the audience a seat at the table, and yet this table is unlike any other moment in the series. Here, every word holds weight. The breaking of bread is no longer a simple tradition. The sharing of wine is no longer just fellowship. We know that behind every smile, every quiet glance, and every silence, something much greater is unfolding. The supper becomes the bridge between all the laughter and lessons we have seen before, and the suffering and triumph that is about to come. This is what makes the Chosen's approach so powerful. It does not simply tell the story, it lets us feel it. The faces are familiar, the voices are human, the emotions are raw. And in the silence of the Last Supper, we hear echoes of every miracle and every parable leading up to this point. It is as though the entire journey of the series is drawn together into this single room. This single night, this single table. The Last Supper in The Chosen is not just about history. It is about the closeness of friendship, the tension of betrayal, and the weight of love so deep it is willing to give everything. Watching it, we are reminded that these were real people, that this was a real night, and that the story is not just theirs, it is also ours. The night is heavy. The air outside Jerusalem is thick with the noise of pilgrims, the shuffle of feet on stone streets, the cries of merchants, and the smell of roasted lamb drifting through narrow alleys. But inside, one quiet upper room, the world feels suspended. The walls are plain, lit only by the trembling flames of oil lamps. Shadows climb and fall with each flicker, painting the stone with restless shapes. In the middle stands a wooden table, low and simple, yet carrying the weight of eternity. The table is set not with silver or gold, but with the ordinary things of the Passover meal: bread baked flat without yeast, bowls of bitter herbs, roasted lamb, and a single cup of wine that seems to wait for hands that will soon lift it. Nothing in this room appears extraordinary, yet every detail is charged with meaning. The plates are humble, the chairs uneven, the ceiling low. Still, this room will become the stage where heaven meets earth. Jesus enters quietly, carrying himself with the calmness of someone who knows the storm ahead. His eyes hold both gentleness and sorrow, as though he is already bearing tomorrow's cross. The disciples gather around him, some whispering among themselves, some glancing at each other with curiosity, and others sitting in uneasy silence. They do not yet know that this will be their final meal together before everything breaks apart. Peter shifts restlessly, his hands never still, as though his heart is ready to leap before his mind can catch up. John leans closer to the teacher, his devotion quiet but unshakable. Matthew keeps his eyes down, still unsure if he truly belongs in this company of brothers. Thomas watches everything with doubt painted across his face, torn between belief and hesitation. And then there is Judas, his presence heavy, his eyes restless, his silence louder than words. The sound of bread being placed on the table echoes louder than it should. The cup of wine catches the lamp's glow, shining like blood in the shadows. The disciples wait for Jesus to begin the traditional prayers, the same words they have heard since childhood. Words every Jewish family speaks during this night. Yet, something in his silence feels different. Something in his stillness makes the room hold its breath. The setting of this scene is not grand. It is not a palace or a temple. It is a borrowed room in a crowded city. But in the quiet of this upper chamber, eternity bends close. This is where a covenant will be spoken. This is where betrayal will be revealed. This is where love will be poured out like wine. The lamps burn low, the table waits, and the disciples lean forward, unaware that history itself is about to turn on this night. The room falls into a silence that seems to press against the walls. The disciples are waiting for the familiar words of the Passover prayer, the same blessing they had heard since childhood. But instead, Jesus takes the bread in his hands and holds it longer than expected. The crackle of the lamp flames is the only sound. His fingers press gently against the loaf, and then with a steady movement, he breaks it. The sound of tearing bread feels louder than the voices in the street outside. Every disciple looks up. Bread is a common thing, but in the hands of the teacher, it carries something more. His voice is calm yet filled with weight as he says, "This is my body given for you. Take it, eat it, and remember me." The words do not match the ritual they expect. There is no reference to Egypt, no story of the Red Sea, no mention of their ancestors. Instead, he speaks of himself. The disciples glance at one another, uncertain if they heard him correctly. The meaning is not yet clear, but the weight of his words leaves the room trembling with mystery. Then Jesus lifts the cup. The wine within glimmers in the dim light, red and deep. His hand does not shake, though the moment is heavy with sorrow. He looks at them with eyes that seem to pierce time itself, and says, "This is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Drink from it, all of you." His voice does not rise, it does not thunder. It is quiet, yet it carries the force of eternity. The disciples hesitate, unsure. Wine had always been a part of the meal, but never like this. Never as his blood. Still they take the cup in their hands, one by one, and drink. Their lips touch the rim of a cup that now carries both life and death. In that moment, a new covenant is born. No longer just the memory of freedom from Pharaoh, but freedom from sin and death itself. The bread is broken. The cup is shared, and a silence follows that no one dares to break. In the minds of the disciples, confusion swirls. Why speak of his body? Why speak of his blood? What does he mean by poured out? They do not yet see the cross that waits just beyond this night. They do not yet understand that the bread is the offering of his life, and the wine is the promise sealed in his sacrifice. But heaven understands. Angels must have leaned close, watching the moment unfold. What Jesus does here is not just for the 12 around the table, it's for every soul who will ever come to this meal in faith. It is for every church that will break bread in his name. It is for every believer who will lift a cup and remember. The bread and the cup are not only symbols. They are an invitation, a gift, a covenant that reaches across centuries. As the last drops of wine return to the cup, the room feels different. It is no longer just a supper. It is the beginning of communion between God and humanity, a bond that will never be broken. The disciples sit in silence, holding breadcrumbs on their palms and the taste of wine on their tongues, unaware that they have just touched eternity. The bread has been broken. The cup has been lifted. For a moment, the disciples sit in silence, their hearts stirred, though they cannot yet explain why. But then the tone shifts. The calm in Jesus' eyes carries a shadow now. His voice, gentle but steady, breaks the stillness with words that pierce the table like a blade. "One of you will betray me." The disciples freeze. Their breath catches in their throats. They glance at each other with wide eyes, as though betrayal is too heavy a word to even imagine among brothers who have shared hunger, laughter, and danger. Together, the air grows heavy. The lamp flames seem to flicker lower, as though even the light recoils from his words. Whispers ripple around the table. "Surely not me, Lord." Peter leans forward, his voice filled with fire, unable to accept that any of them could betray the teacher he vowed to follow. John, seated close to Jesus, leans against him, searching his face for an answer. Matthew lowers his head, the old guilt of his past pressing against his chest, afraid that perhaps his weakness might make him the one. Thomas, already a man of questions, feels doubt wrap around him like a storm. And then, as though the silence demands a sign, Judas shifts. His hand moves toward the dish in the center of the table, dipping bread into it at the very same moment. Jesus does. The sound of the bread soaking into the bowl is louder than the murmur of the others. Jesus' eyes meet his. The teacher's gaze is not filled with anger, but with sorrow so deep it seems to echo eternity. "What you are about to do, do quickly." Judas' heart pounds. His face grows tight, but he says nothing. The other disciples do not understand the exchange. They believe perhaps Judas has been sent to give to the poor or to purchase supplies for the feast. Only Jesus knows. Only Judas knows. And heaven itself trembles at the weight of this choice. The betrayal is not shouted, not exposed with fury. It is revealed in quiet words, in a shared dish, in the meeting of two hands. Yet the silence that follows is heavier than thunder. Table that moments ago carried covenant now carries the shadow of betrayal. Bread has become body, wine has become blood, and now trust has become brokenness. Still, Jesus does not resist. He does not stop Judas. He lets the choice stand, for the cross will not be avoided. Love will not be forced. The path of betrayal is the path that leads to redemption, and even in this moment, even as Judas prepares to walk into the night, the teacher's love does not falter. His eyes still hold the pain of mercy. The disciples remain confused, whispering among themselves, unaware that the world is already shifting. Judas rises slowly, his steps echoing against the stone floor. The door closes behind him, and the room feels colder, emptier, as though darkness itself has entered the city. The table now holds 11 men, and yet the shadow of the missing one hangs heavy in the air. The revelation of betrayal is not just about Judas. It is about every heart that has ever chosen silver over love, darkness over light, fear over faith. And yet even here, at the edge of betrayal, Jesus' love shines brighter than the lamps. For he does not only see the traitor, he sees the brokenness of the world, and he is ready to bear it all. The room is no longer the same. The sound of Judas's footsteps has faded into the night, yet his absence lingers like a shadow that refuses to leave. 11 men remain at the table, but the unity that once filled their laughter now feels cracked. Jesus sits among them, his face calm, his eyes carrying a depth they cannot yet measure. Around him, the disciples wrestle with emotions they cannot put into words. Peter is the first to break the silence, his boldness rising like fire. He swears under his breath that he would never betray the teacher. His voice carries pride, but beneath it trembles fear. He does not see the path that will lead him to a courtyard where his words will falter before the crow of dawn. For now, his loyalty burns bright, untested by the night that is coming. John, the beloved disciple, leans closer to Jesus, his heart heavy with love and sorrow. He feels the tension in the air, the weight pressing down on his brothers, yet he clings to the closeness of the teacher's presence. His devotion is steady, gentle, unspoken, like a quiet flame that will never be put out. He does not speak many words, but his silence is not emptiness. It is trust. Matthew stares at the table, his fingers tracing the edge of the wood. Memories of his old life as a tax collector rise, uninvited betrayals he once committed against his own people. Question stirs within him. Could a man like him truly remain faithful when tested? He feels the gaze of others even when no one is looking. The old shame of his past whispering that perhaps he does not belong. Thomas shifts uneasily, his doubt sharper now. Mind races to make sense of Jesus' words: body, blood, betrayal. Nothing fits into the boxes of logic he clings to. He wants to believe, he longs to believe, yet the mystery unsettles him. His faith flickers, fragile but not extinguished. The others sit caught between confusion and devotion. Their hearts are pulled in different directions, yet none dare to leave. The silence grows thick, interrupted only by the faint crackle of oil lamps and the muffled noise of the city below. Each man carries his own storm, his own questions, his own fear of failing the teacher he loves. And at the center of it all sits Jesus, steady as the eye of the storm. His gaze moves from face to face, not in judgment, but in compassion. He knows Peter's pride will crumble. He knows Thomas' doubt will deepen. He knows every weakness, every fear, every flaw. Yet he remains, offering love that does not waver. The weight of their failures does not push him away, draws him closer. These emotional undercurrents are invisible to the world outside. To those in the streets, this is just another meal in another upper room. But within these walls, heaven sees the trembling hearts of men who will soon scatter in fear. It sees their brokenness, their weakness, and still, it sees their place in the story. For this supper is not only about covenant, it is also about grace. The lamps burn low, the bread is gone, the cup is empty. The meal that began with tradition has ended with a covenant that no one fully understood that night. The disciples leave the table carrying more questions than answers, their hearts unsettled, their futures uncertain. Yet from that room, from that simple act of breaking bread and sharing wine, a legacy was born that would reach far beyond Jerusalem, far beyond their lifetimes, far beyond the first century. The Last Supper became more than a memory. It became a practice woven into the life of the church. Across generations and across nations, believers gather around tables, whether in grand cathedrals or quiet homes, to take bread and wine and remember the words of Jesus. This is my body. Yes. This is my blood. What began in a hidden room has become a worldwide echo, spoken in every language. It's carried through every culture. The power of that night is not in the bread itself or the wine itself. The power is in what they point to: the sacrifice of love, the offering of life, the promise that through his brokenness, we are made whole. The cup still reminds us that his blood was poured out not just for those 11 men, but for all who would ever believe. The table has no walls, no boundaries. It is open to every heart that comes in faith. Even in art, in music, in storytelling, the Last Supper continues to live. Painters captured it in color, sculptors carved it in stone, poets wrapped it in verses, filmmakers reimagined it for new generations. Each attempt reminds us that this was not only history but mystery, not only an ending, but also a beginning. The table was a place of sorrow, yes, but also of hope. For in giving himself, Jesus offered the world a gift that cannot be taken away.